basically lay down in
Well, if you want to shut off the camera, you can.
No.
Okay. Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are joined by the boys from StoryProof, where we'll be taking a look at Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which came out last month. And it's kind of an interesting movie. I watched it several times and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into Frankenstein, because Bradley, you and I earlier this year, we did our own review of Nosferatu, and then you guys at StoryProof did your own review of Nosferatu by Robert Eggers, and roughly around that time, they made the announcement that Guillermo del Toro was going to do his own take on Frankenstein. So I thought for the most part that Guillermo del Toro would kind of follow the same vein that Robert Eggers was following, but as we know, Robert Eggers has a different interpretation of Gothic than Guillermo del Toro, right? Del Toro can sort of be seen more following along the lines of the Tim Burton family-friendly, fantastical Gothic, whereas Robert Eggers is more visceral. I guess you could say it's sort of like a melding of Sam Peckinpah and Werner Herzog in this execution.
That is a perfect description.
Yeah,
a good way to describe that.
But but in watching this movie, it actually made me scratch my head and wonder what exactly was going on here. And I don't know about you guys, but when Lee and I, when we were in school, we had to read Frankenstein as part of our high school English class. And I actually went to a Barnes and Noble last week, brave the crowds, the Christmas shopping crowds, and actually bought a copy of Frankenstein and read through it, because I kept thinking to myself, I know this didn't really happen in the book, but I just had to double check. So I just want to throw it to I'll throw it out to you, Lee, since you're the movie pope here. What were your thoughts as you were watching this before we dive deeper into this?
Yeah, no, I mean, initially, like, I never really liked to do the whole like book to a movie type of comparison, especially if that's where it originated from. But the more that I watched it, the more I'm like, why did Guillermo del Toro decide that this certain story element or this character, why did he feel the need to change it around or add this person or subtract this person? So the more I kind of got into it, the more I'm like, it's actually probably pretty interesting to kind of talk about some of the things that were changed. And I would say probably the biggest one, which, I definitely don't want to give too much away here. Otherwise, we'll just talk about all of them before we even talk about the movie. But I think just like kind of the stark contrast where I feel like in the original one, we kind of view Victor Frankenstein and the creature, right? We kind of view them as both being fairly morally gray in the original start. And I feel like in this version of it, there's a lot more good versus evil, a lot more bad versus good. And it definitely made me kind of question why he felt like there was what the need was to get rid of some of that grayness, which I felt like the original work did such a good job with. As I said, don't want to get too much into that because we'll be sitting here all day for that. But, that was definitely the biggest thing that stuck out to me. As I was kind of watching through this, not to take away anything from some of the gorgeous set work, costumes, and everything like that, which I will gladly push on to some of my peers that are much better talking about that stuff. But there's a lot to enjoy, and it was just interesting. We've seen so many different depictions of Frankenstein over the years. You've mentioned quite a few. Then you've got like something like Young Frankenstein, which is a total just comedy. So there's so many different variations of it. So there's always been change. It's always interesting to see why a director feels that a certain vision is maybe better suited than what's already out there. Or, hey, is it something where, it's already been done great before, I want to give my own spin of things. And hey, that's fine, right? I appreciate people wanted to take some shots at something different. But it does make me wonder, did it make the story better or did it make the story worse? And that's where a lot of my mindset came from watching.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's probably the most common, like the most recurring, I don't know if complaint is the right word, but the most common issue I've heard people having with this movie is the fact that a lot of the nuance was taken out between you know, who was the monster and who was the man. This movie is like, oh no, 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 no. It's very. But we went and saw this in theaters when it came out, and then we rewatched it when it came out on Netflix. And I heard people talk about the lack of nuance as well. And I started thinking really about Guillermo del Toro and his films, what I really knew him from. And I think Pan's Labyrinth is probably one of his most well-known. Maybe Hellboy is probably his most well-known, but Pan's Labyrinth is pretty up there. When you boil the ending of that movie down to, it is literally childhood innocence and children versus Nazis. You're not going to get much more obvious good versus obvious the end of that. So I was like, you know, the more I thought about it, the more I think I get where he's coming from, where he wants it to be a lot clearer. But I will also say that when we rewatched it, my favorite scene in this movie, and I told Brendan, I was like, what makes this movie for me is, I'm not trying to like jump to the end of the plot or anything, but when we finally get the reconciliation between Frankenstein and quote unquote the monster, that scene for me, I'm like, I feel like this really makes the whole movie for me, is to see them come together, to see them have this bit of reconciliation, the fact they're both like, I'm sorry I created you, I'm sorry I broke your nose, I'm sorry we killed, but you know, it's just all this crap stuff that happened.
I blew up your leg.
Yeah, but it's very nice where I kind of feel like, because you know, when we watched it the first time, I'm like, man, Frankenstein, you get to a point in the story where you're like, you like him, you like him, you like him, you like him, and then it gets to a point where you're just going to dislike him more as the movie goes on. Like
Yeah.
he gets worse and worse and worse. But at the end, I feel like he kind of comes back up enough that I see a little bit more of the nuance there. So I'm like, the fact that it ended on that, the good versus evil didn't bother me as much. But I completely get why people wanted a bit more of the nuance, wanted a bit more of who is the monster, who is the man.
Yeah, part of that is just Del Toro in general, though. I haven't seen like every single one of his films. I've seen a good chunk of them, though, and a lot of them. The term that gets thrown around with them is fairy tale. They're very much fairy tale-esque in their way, including this one, especially once you start to get the creature's perspective on everything. It's very pastoral. He's even talked about that in the press for the movie. So, and fairy tales are very much a good versus evil kind of thing. And when you watch a lot of Del Toro stuff, you can tell very much who he sympathizes with and who he thinks is the good versus the evil in his stories. Sometimes, as Bradley pointed out, it's very blatant, and sometimes it's not as much.
I mean, but to your point, Brendan, I mean, isn't that up for the audience to decide? Why is it that Del Toro is impressing upon us who he thinks is good and evil? That's what I kind of have an issue with, because you know, for the creative type, for the director, their job is to basically provide us the vision of what they want us to see, and then we kind of extrapolate the meaning from it, right?
Right.
If someone, if Del Toro is saying, well, you have to root for the monster because Victor Frankenstein is bad, it's like, well, that's kind of shitty. Like, so I can't even make my own decisions. I'm supposed to think what you're telling me to think. It kind of defeats the purpose of trying to tell a story if you're already decided who's worth supporting, who's worth booing.
Yeah.
But what I would also say too, because as I was watching this movie, it kind of reminded me of I don't know how big you guys were at, were at reading way back in the day, but I remember as a kid, the Oxford Press and Penguin, they used to have the children's versions of the classics. So like, the children's version of Frankenstein, the children's version of Dracula. This read very much like the children's version of Frankenstein, because whereas in the novel, Victor Frankenstein and Elizabeth had this deep relationship that turns romantic, as the story progresses. Here it's very platonic. It's not you don't really get anything from it. It's like, oh, I really, really like you. Oh, well, I like you too, but only as a friend. So bye, that kind of thing. It just felt like Del Toro excised, a bunch of what I felt were crucial elements in order to tell the story that he wanted to tell. But we've bandied on long enough. So Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us into Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and we can pile on from here.
Yeah, let's go ahead and let's get into the juicy bits here for Frankenstein. So the movie kind of starts off. We get this prelude, right? And it starts off in the farthermost north place is what the credits tell us. So very specific direction. I know it's somewhere up in the Arctic as we meet a ship crew that's trying to get to the North Pole. And the ship captain actually ends up finding an injured Victor Frankenstein, who is being chased by something, right? And I like how they definitely kind of put him in cloaks, right, for the creature. And I really like how they don't outright just show it to you, right? Because I think as an audience, right, we're always very curious to see how the creature's going to look because it's such an iconic character, right? It's something that we've seen for, probably like almost 100 years, right? When is the first time we see some of these characters on the big screen, so to say? So it is something where it's very much shrouded in mystery. And I always thought that this is an interesting storytelling device, that really all this is like kind of them running into a random ship captain and having like the whole story happen through just like him recounting everything. But, hey, that's just kind of the way it goes. And I think in this movie, it actually kind of makes more sense now I think about why they kind of do it like that. But hey, we'll talk about that at the end. But it all starts off with us getting Victor Frankenstein on the ship. He starts to kind of recount his life, right? That kind of led up to this moment and helping explain what is this thing that's chasing after him. So we get a flashback, right? We get to see, Victor's kind of early life. We see his family dynamic. One has a very strained relationship with the father, and I think that's probably putting it nicely. And very clearly adores his mother, right? He is definitely a mama's boy in this depiction of it. And, we see too where Victor has this interest in the body, right? And I think it's really cool that his father's this renowned surgeon. So even though he doesn't respect his father, he has a huge interest in what he's doing. Now, granted, that's kind of forced upon him.
Lee, I was going to say, it's kind of interesting that they get Charles Dance to play the character, because out of all the other actors you could have gotten, Charles Dance just seems to be the only one who kind of conveys that sense of authority.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Does it quite well, man. Love that guy and everything he's done. And it's very clear.
We rewatched this last night, and it really hit me. And I pointed out, I'm like, Charles Dance really makes me think of Christopher Lee. Like when he got older and started doing like sometimes even smaller roles in movies and fantastical movies and stuff like that. I'm like, as soon as I see him, I'm like, this is an older guy who owns the screen anytime he's on it.
I mean, remember he played the elder vampire in Dracula Untold, right? Yeah. So it's definitely fitting that he would kind of take up the mantle that Christopher Lee kind of dropped when he went to his reward. I mean, who knows? Maybe he might make an appearance in another Lord of the Rings adaptation at some point. I mean,
yep, never know. But yeah, so we see kind of Victor's relationship with the father. And we see that his mother is pregnant. And I would say from Victor's standpoint, obviously has a lot of concerns. We see that the mother goes into childbirth, which is different from the original one, right? Where the mom dies of scarlet fever, I believe it was. In this version, dies during childbirth. But this is what kind of creates, or this is what kind of starts the idea for Victor Frankenstein, that he wants to find a way to almost cheat death. And I think having his, mom die like this and seeing how he adores her, I think gives a whole lot of urgency to why he wants to do what he wants to do. But with that being said, right, I have to say this, right, and even though I don't talk about that much on this channel, the set designs for this, the costumes, the look of it, this is just, it was amazing to see. And I like how we kind of start off in like the Arctic on this like cruddy old boat, and it looks just like so beat up, and then we see this flashback where it immediately jettisons us into this like huge chateau, and it is just marvelous and it looks amazing. So I wanted to see from your guys' perspective, right? Because I don't really talk a lot about this. I don't have a lot of knowledge about that. But I would say just looking at this, I felt like you could see the money on the screen as they were making this. And I have to give Del Toro so many props for just how amazing everything looked, especially like a lot of the female costume designs between the mom and what we see with Elizabeth, played by Mia Goth, wearing. It just looked incredible. So I wanted to, give everyone an opportunity to talk a little bit about how they enjoyed the look of this, because Del Toro has such a unique vision, and I think he did an incredible job with a lot of what he had.
Oh, we're going to go to me first.
If you want me to go first, you have to mute because your microphone picks me up.
Yeah.
All right. So, especially in rewatching this, there are a lot of things that I noticed the first time but solidified the second time, particularly when you talk about Mia Goth, and because she does annoyingly also play the mother. I don't buy it. I know Wikipedia says it's her, IMDb says it's her. I watched it last night again, and I'm like, I don't think it's her.
You did wait, so you didn't freeze frame that scene where she's in the casket to sort of take a look, because that's what I did 3 times, and I was convinced that was Mia Goth.
Just mostly you see her because when you first see her, she got the big red veil on, but you mostly see her when she and Victor are playing cards right before she goes into labor, and then when they're at the dinner table, I'm like, no, it's not her. It is her. I just don't think it looks like her. But the fact that when you first see, like you mentioned, when you get to the chateau, everything is black and white, and she is in this huge red, vibrant red outfit. Later on, when we see Elizabeth in the little market, everything's black. Everything is black or gray or white, and she is in vibrant colors. They do a great job with her costumes and outfits with matching the color of wherever she is. When they're in the scene where she and Victor are chasing butterflies, she's in a very yellowy green dress against a yellowy green background looking at yellowy green butterflies. When she leaves the tower, I guess, where Victor has done most of his work, when she leaves, her dress, her green, it is the perfect color of the grass growing outside. I mean, she color matches everything flawlessly, and it makes her stick out. It makes her look so vibrant. When you first meet her, I think she looks a little ridiculous. The big like hairpiece feather things on the side, I'm like, this is like Renaissance Princess Leia, and it looks goofy. But I like what she wears the rest of the movie. I think it's great. I also like the fact that when she has her meeting with Frankenstein, with Victor, where he confesses his love for her, she's wearing red. Later on, when we see his work outfit, everything he's wearing is black except his leather gloves, which are red. There's a lot of interesting color parallels in this. The costumes are great. When we watched it last night, when Charles Dance shows up to the chateau when you first meet him, Brendan was like, my God, this outfit looks like it's straight out of Amadeus. And that's a very accurate statement. He said that, I'm like, God, you're right. It does look like that.
I mean, it's roughly the same time period anyway, so.
It's a fair assessment relation as well. But yeah, when you do talk about sets, I mean, most of this movie takes place in the big tower where Victor does his work. You've got the ship where a lot of it takes place there. You've got a bit in the chateau at the beginning, and then you've really got the little house where the monster is interacting with the family. Beyond that, most of the sets you're at, you don't spend a lot of time in. So it's crazy to think we have a ship, castle, chateau. You've got this giant Gothic tower that we see blown up at one point, and then you've got just a little, like, almost like a farmhouse. And that's where we spend the majority of our film, so we get a little bit of everything. But yeah, the set design in this is fantastic. The costumes are fantastic. One thing, when you mentioned Eggers earlier, one thing about him is his worlds just feel so unbelievably lived in. This doesn't quite have that level of realism. I don't feel it as much, but I don't really want to in this. I was like, this is a lot more fantastical. This is, I will also say, mentioning Eggers, I forgot Ralph Ineson was in this movie. He's in it for a minute or two. Totally forgot he was in this.
It was the wig, right?
I told Brendan, I'm like, that's his natural hair. You just know it. Like, you hear that voice, that's the kind of hair that guy should have. But yeah, everything just felt so well done across the board. And yeah, I especially like when you talk about costumes. I especially like Mia Goth's costumes. Everything for her is just, except for the stupid hair piece at the beginning, but whatever.
Yeah.
All the rest of it, I'm like, this is excellent, truly excellent.
So the thing that is what
You start talking, yeah.
the thing that I always find interesting, especially in Del Toro, I love when sets are actually there and you can tell that they're there and they're done with miniatures. It's one of the things I loved about Fantastic Four earlier in the year, is they built actual like miniatures and sets for Galactus to stop around in and stuff like that. So I know they actually built quite a bit of set in this. They built the actual ship set there. They built miniatures for the tower, especially with with everything being blown up. And as far as the color goes, I am not an expert at all in color theory. So that's one thing that kind of goes over my head sometimes. I know the red is very symbolic of like motherhood and life, according to Del Toro. So that's why it kind of follows Victor being the mama's boy that he is in this movie, going the entire way through the movie. And it's a sort of an expression of life, death, motherhood, everything else in between. The reason Mia Goth's colors are so prominent is because they are about nature. Like, she's the one that brings nature and life into everything. But that's about as far as I can go with the color theory. Del Toro's always been very good at these very stark colors. It's one of his things that he does. I think of like Crimson Peak. You have the snow around the little village, and then it's just the big splashes of red and color and everything. Like, when I think of Del Toro, I think of just these pops of color everywhere on the screen. So I love the look of his movies. I love the look of this movie. It's so gorgeous to look at.
Well, I mean, the sets are pretty much on brand for what Del Toro does, because this guy lives in the Gothic genre. It's like, and really when he's giving us all these different shots of the ship, the tower, even the fetid alleyways of London and Edinburgh, you can tell this is a man who wants us to be immersed in the same world that his characters are in. In terms of the colors, I would say that Del Toro kind of gravitates towards the earth tone. So like these dark, muted colors to kind of emphasize just how dark and earthy the world is for his characters, right? With the exception of the red, which obviously stands up, because if you're going to do a horror film, the rule of thumb is everything you got to have red be as bright as possible, so hey, there's going to be blood later on, so just so you know. But I would also say too is that the sets are kind of distracting as well, right? Because as I mentioned earlier, if you kind of distract us with like a beautiful set and great costumes and and everything kind of blending together, it can be easy for you to kind of forget the story might be a bit subpar, right? It's kind of like you jangling your keys in front of a crying kid to distract them while the doctor sticks them with a needle for their shots, right? I kind of feel like Del Toro is definitely in his element when he does these wonderful sets. There's no doubt about it. Everything from when we see in Pan's Labyrinth, Crimson Peak, the Hellboy movies, but at the same time, it's like someone should tell him you do have permission to go as dark as possible in your storytelling. You don't have to necessarily keep it within the realm of being family friendly. That was, I guess that's my only gripe about it, because I'm not really knocking the sets or the costuming, per se, but it's more of like I sort of see it as like a distraction from trying to tell a story that is at least faithful to what Mary Shelley is giving us. So
fair. So, but yeah, so great conversation. Like I said, definitely something that's way above my pay grade, right? My little brain does not get into it all as much as you guys do. So thank you for helping me out there, because I knew it was great. I just don't know how to explain how great it is. So thank you guys for doing that. And so we kind of get this, I guess, kind of flash forward, right? So we kind of see Victor in his youth, right? His mom dies during childbirth. Father killed a little bit later on, or dies a little bit later on. And we kind of fast forward to him now being I would say, fairly well known within the medical world, right? At least somewhat. And we see he's making a lot of progress with reanimating life. And I have to admit, when they unveiled what was behind the curtain as he was out there in front of all these doctors, definitely freaked me out the first time. I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of the first time I really started to see how gruesome some of this is going to look. And that definitely was something I was not expecting. But one of the things that happens at this meeting is he ends up meeting Henrik Harlander, right? And I believe this is a character that's not in the original Mary Shelley work, right? So this is a totally new character done by Del Toro. And Harlander knows Victor's brother, William, and William's fiance, who happens to be Elizabeth. And we can see right off the bat, right, the first time Elizabeth comes to the room, and now we've talked a lot about Mia Goth and how she looks. She absolutely has a very clear presence when she walks in. She sticks out like a sore thumb. And Victor definitely is, I would say, smitten by her as soon as she comes on the screen. And we get a chance to kind of meet everything. And Harlander, right, he's interested in offering Victor pretty much unfettered resources to continue his research to kind of create this. And this is where we get to go to our fancy cliff tower, as I call it, which, like I said, never understood. There's so many movies where there's this giant tower on a cliff, right? You see it a bunch, you see it in horror films. It's just like, hey, cool, what should we put over here? We'll just dangle this giant tower on top of a cliff and hope nothing bad happens.
I mean, he's leaning onto those tropes pretty heavily.
So, I know, right? I keep just thinking about other like films where it's just like, oh, cool, we got this giant thing just overseeing a cliff. It's always very interesting. But yes, there's this great tower that's there, and they kind of use it for everything. And as they're trying to get everything ready for the future experiments, I like how Victor, he pretty much keeps his brother William off doing other things, and he constantly kind of like, I feel like he purposely goes out of his way to be like, no, that's not good enough, just so he could buy time to be around Elizabeth, right? So you kind of get some of this nice love kind of angle coming in. And this is one of those things I thought was very odd to me, right? So we see kind of him, trying to court Elizabeth pretty much being uninterested, right, in his advances. And I thought this was very interesting because, in the iterations, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein over 20 years ago. I could barely remember what I had for breakfast last week. So maybe I'm mistaken, but I've always viewed Elizabeth, right? She was the fiance, in the original one. It was really weird to me that she pretty much is like not really in a relationship at all with him, right? It is totally different from that. And as I kind of looked at it, I wondered why it was the way it was. And initially, the first time I was watching it, I didn't really pick up on it because I wasn't sure the direction it was going. But upon rewatch, it almost made me feel like maybe Guillermo del Toro was kind of showing his cards a little bit early, that he wanted Victor to kind of not be like him going after his brother's wife or fiance, kind of makes him to be more unlikable to the audience. And that's why I kind of feel like they're going with it. But I just wanted your guys' perspective on this. Why change it where Elizabeth, who's predominantly always been with Victor Frankenstein, why make her someone that's really not in a romantic relationship or interested in him?
I would say it's more of an Oedipus complex with Victor because, if IMDb is to be believed, Mia Goth did play the mother from the beginning. So as I watched and rewatched, I kind of got the feeling that he kind of pursues her, but he's kind of half-hearted in it because he doesn't really want to cross that line to where he's like, I would do anything to have you, right? He kind of, because when she tells him, I've made my choice, and she kind of walks away, he's like, oh, okay, well, that's it. I mean, I can go back to playing with dead people, but I couldn't help but think that there's a part of Victor Frankenstein that misses his mother. To your point, Lee, because he is a mama's boy. He's old enough to remember her and have memories of her, whereas William, he really didn't remember much of his mother. I mean, she died, when he was fairly young, right? So maybe there's a part of Victor that's trying to sort of not, I guess, not resurrect, for lack of a better word, but kind of reimagine or sort of, relive those happy memories that he had. And he just happens that this woman strangely resembles his late mother, right? And she even dresses in vibrant colors, to Bradley's point, just like Mama did. But I would also say too that Del Toro is definitely playing the PG card. He definitely wants to not have it to where Elizabeth and Victor are passionately making out and in a rainstorm like Kenneth Branagh and Helena Bonham Carter did in the old movie. So I felt like at least there, like, Victor Frankenstein was very much just trying to play it safe and just at least try to, like, get to know her, get to be familiar with her, because hey, we are family, in one sense or another, right? Not only are you going to be marrying into the family, but in a way you already are a part of the family, in that weird sort of reincarnational kind of way.
Yeah, it is also interesting when you mention that not quite sure if he has interested her more in a I love you, or yes, you, very much maternal, you remind me of my mother type thing. Because I think there's a very similar thing with Elizabeth and the creature. Is there is clearly something there. Is it love? Is it mother son? Is what is it? So I think it would be a very interesting way to view both of them. Is it's not clearly stated, but I do really like I was laughing with Brendan. I was like, oh my god, I'm seeing this scene for the first time. I remember I had to pee when we saw this in theaters, and I missed this like minute or two of whatever. But it's when she meets the creature or sees the creature at night and comes out, and Victor is outside and is like, you shouldn't talk to him. That little scene there, and he's like, I love you. I know, like, in my brain, I love you. And she kind of smiles and like, your brain is the furthest organ you've got from, or your heart is the furthest organ you have from understanding. I was like, I love the very, very elegant way to say you're thinking with your dick right now. That was a very classy way of saying that. But yeah, I do like the parallel between those two relationships where you kind of do have to wonder what is it? Is it attraction, infatuation? Is it something a bit more twisted? Yeah, I do enjoy that.
I do definitely read, at least with Victor's side of things, a bit more of the Oedipal side, as you were saying, Luca. It's very, like, you see him early on, it's almost like he's kind of stuck in that youthful mama's boy sort of atmosphere up until the point that the creature is created, because you see him drinking nothing but milk. He has nothing but vices or anything else. No, he has no vices the entire time. He just drinks milk, no alcohol, no smoking, no anything. So it's almost, in a way, I don't want to say infantilizing, but it's very much sort of along those lines. And I think there is sort of that aspect between him and Elizabeth in this movie where he sees not just the physical resemblance to his mother, but also the way that he talks about her through his narration, you can see that she shares similar viewpoints and life and views on life and sort of the life of the character in Elizabeth as well. I don't know if I'm expressing that thought precisely as it is in
no, you are. That
But-
totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's my read on it, at least from that perspective. But yeah, I
Well,
don't
you notice. Well, I was gonna say because you notice too, because Victor isn't really jealous of William, you know, because even though William is engaged to her, he's like he really doesn't feel threatened by by him. But when Elizabeth begins to show more attention to the monster, there's almost like this jealousy. It's kind of a jealousy that you get when your parents have a new baby, right? And it's like
two siblings fighting for mama's attention.
exactly. So so at that point, when he begins to like go hog wild and starts hazing, the monster, it's like, it's I wouldn't say he's doing it to be sadistic. It's more of like, she can never love you because she loved me first, right?
Yeah.
And who are you? You're just a big dumb creature who can't even say hand, right? And
Yeah.
and even at the beginning, the monster too is very childlike, because I mean, you remember that one point he's holding the razor and Victor's like, no, let go of it, and he drops it, and it's like, yeah, I mean there is a lot of that childlike wonder and innocence going on, but there's also a lot of childlike jealousy that's going on between Victor, and the monster doesn't really know what the hell's going on here, right? He's just like walking around in, I guess it's like a loincloth or a man diaper or something like that. So when Elizabeth kind of starts turning against Victor, he begins to feel, all right, well, now the gloves are off. Now I really got to go after this guy, or at least kind of give him two barrels, just because he's trying to take her away from me. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that he's as miserable as I am, because he's making me feel like a miserable little brat right at the moment.
Well, remember as well, the thing that ultimately sets Victor off to finally take that step to try to kill the creature and destroy the tower is that he says Elizabeth's name.
Oh,
yep.
I was about to say, you're about to say this. No. He is already going to blow up that tower. He is already setting fuel. He is done. He goes to the creature and says, "Say one word, make me save you." Victor.
So is he just?
He walks away is when he says Elizabeth.
So is he?
Working it.
So let me ask you guys this: so was he going to kill the creature just because he thought he was too stupid to do anything?
Yes.
Because all I kept saying was Victor. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
I think he's caught as a lost cause.
He spent months and months gathering corpses and putting things together, and then he just decides in that one moment, I'm just going to blow it up. Fuck everything. I don't care how much money was wasted on this on this stupid cliff tower. Fuck this. I'm just going to blow it up and whatever.
Well,
Two parts of this movie where one, I feel like they do it well. One, I feel like they do it very badly, is the progression of time. I am very unclear about how much time happens between the creating of the tower, the creation of the creature, to the point William and Elizabeth are there. Like, I'm a little unclear, because we know it is at least, I would say, a few weeks that the creature's been there, because we see the hair growth. So I'm like, okay, that's a little bit, but I has it been months? Has it been? I would imagine years, because Harlan has been gone for quite some time. I imagine it to perhaps be a few months, but they're not clear about it. But it does seem, at least when we're watching it, that Victor turns hostile towards the creature remarkably quickly.
Yes.
He gets so annoyed. It seems like so fast, and that's where I have to question. I'm like, has it been 2 days? Has it been a month? Because it does seem like he turns really fast. I will say the good progressive time they show is when Victor loses his leg, and then we see later on that it is healed up to a certain point. This is the wedding. When the creature is in the farmhouse, we can tell it has been a while. We see like a season change. We get a pretty good sense there. that it's been a pretty good amount of time. But yeah, in that first chunk, I'm like, I can't quite tell how long he wants it to be. So I can't tell if Victor's just a super dick to him, like immediately, or if it has been, I would imagine, building over perhaps months, but it is a little hard to say definitively. So I think that probably built up, and then finally something made him crack. I think it is probably, I would think Elizabeth showing interest in him, that he's like, you know what, fuck this guy. He was already annoying me. This is a good sign to be done with it. But yeah, I definitely think that it has been a build up of quite some time, that he finally like, this isn't worth my time anymore.
Well, keep in mind too, because Harland, the guy who's funding this, we come to find out he's got syphilis, right? So so you remember in that scene in the bathroom where Victor's like, "Well, I need more time," and he's like, "Wait, I thought you said that your resources were limitless," and Harlander says, "My resources are, but my patience is limited," right? Because because at that time, if you've got syphilis, you've got, I mean, months. That's
Yes.
being optimistic of living. So, and you also say too, he's just like dousing himself with arsenic, which surprisingly, I did some research about this, was a pretty common treatment. A night with Venus, means a lifetime with Mercury, and we did a review of Out of Africa where Meryl Streep's character also contracts syphilis, and she has to take arsenic. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that someone would have to be on this regimen for a considerable amount of time. But also keep in mind too, like the more you're dosing yourself with these toxic elements, the shorter your lifespan is going to be, ironically enough. So it has to be at least be within a few months span, because as we get closer and closer to the creature getting animated, Harlander is kind of pushing it to where it's like, hey, maybe if you can hurry this up a little bit, because we don't have that much time left. And Victor's probably thinking, well, why is that? I mean, you can't rush perfection. But he's like, no, we got to get a move on this, because I haven't got much time left.
I was also going to say, I noticed it last night. This is a funny thing, but in that scene, when they're in the bathroom, Christoph Waltz, man, I got to give it to Harlander in that scene. They're in the bathroom, he unzips, he starts peeing. Both of his hands are up, and he is accurately hitting that. Freaking kudos for a man of his age, because it's not a urinal. It is a fairly small toilet, and I'm like, man, the details you just notice in movies sometimes are very funny.
And he even asks Victor, he's like, Baron, please flush that for me. It's
Yeah.
yep, that's the nouveau riche sticking it to the old money,
Yeah, this dude's out here 360 no scoping in the bathroom. That's pretty good aim.
I do want to go back to the discussion point about
Being right and you being wrong.
about Victor and the creature, because it's been about a year or so since I last read Frankenstein, but if I remember correctly, in the book, he's immediately turned off by the creature and just tries to take care of it, get rid of it, burn it all down, and then goes back to his life in Vienna. So there's not even that progression there. In this movie, for like the briefest moment when he first wakes up and sees the creature, he's in awe of this new thing that he's created, and he's almost trying, and then he has the big switch up.
He's got more patience in the movie than he does in the book.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct about the timeline. The timeline isn't clear, so it does make his 360 on the creature be very much unclear about like why exactly. But it also is very much drawing parallels to the fact that Victor is much more like his father than he would like to admit. Right down to the fact that you see him actually physically abusing the creature to try to get him to say something.
And he even uses the same, something similar to the switch that his father used to kind of.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I pointed out last night. I don't think I called it the first time, but when he chains up the creature to the big,
I think it's like a tomb or something.
Yeah, that's a sarcophagus. I'm like, that's not quite it, but it's kind of close. And then when he sticks the iron rod through it, that rod that he got looks a lot like the switch that his dad hit him with.
Yeah.
I noticed that last night as he was walking in with it for a minute. I'm like, what is that? I don't remember that. And then when I saw him put it through, I'm like, oh shit, I thought it was a giant switch.
Yeah.
I will also say, I don't know if you guys are big into horror movies, but I've been rewatching the Saw movies here lately.
Yeah.
It's completely unrelated to Frankenstein, but there's a funny thing where, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the Saw movies that are really old, in Saw 3, Jigsaw dies at the end of it. So
Yeah.
then there are still 45 movies in the series, and when you go back and watch them, the Saw 4 starts with his autopsy. Like, his brain has been removed. He has been like, it is so clear he is dead. When Harlander falls in this, it's so funny because he like hits the ground. You're like, oh, is he maybe gonna be okay? And then and you're like, oh shit, half of his head is gone. No,
Yeah.
that's dead. Like, oh my god.
Well, I
like
gotta,
how the movie.
well, I gotta say though, because when Harlander finally reveals his true motives, I kind of feel like, buddy, it's a little late for you to start making these demands
Yeah.
now. Like, that's what I had an issue with, because Victor was right to be suspicious about Harlander's, supposed generosity, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like the reason that Harlander gives is kind of a bit of a lame, pretty lame, really, right?
For you in the future.
And it's like, well, first of all, like, you are aware of how medical science is in the 19th century, right? I mean, you would. I figured, like, I figured had he like laid the cards out on the table, that would have created a lot more friction, a lot more conflict, right? And then, because if Del Toro really wanted to take Frankenstein in a new direction, had Harlander like come out and said, "I want you to put my brain in that creature's body when the time comes," that can sort of create the conflict that that would take the movie in an entirely new direction, instead of just going with the same old, the creature says, "Oh, I want you to make me a mate because I don't want to be lonely," which, yeah, it's faithful to the novel, but at the same time, if you're all about trying to take Frankenstein in a new direction, I think if you put, the moral question of putting Harlander's brain into this creature kind of creates a sort of, question of, well, have I really gone too far at this point? Because I might have met a guy who maybe just as loony as I am, really, to want to, because it's one thing to take a bunch of corpses and stitch and stitch them together, and really that scene, that montage that we see where he's at the execution sites and he's just like inspecting them like livestock. It's a bit weird, and I will
guy's
even
got a strong back. I could use him.
I will even say, to the music that plays in the background, I felt wasn't right, because it was too waltzy. It was too melodic. I felt like it should have been a bit more dark, A minor key kind of thing, to kind of make it to kind of emphasize just how dark it is. But no, it's very happy-go-lucky, very waltzy. You could sort of dance to it. I felt Del Toro wanted to, I guess, add levity to the situation, but I felt like I felt like Harlander kind of, whatever happened to him, that's on him, because he wasn't transparent with what he was doing or what he wanted at the very beginning.
Yeah, and the other thing that's weird to me is, like, this is not someone that's totally like ignorant to the world of the medical field, right? Like, he says he was a doctor, so he knows how syphilis is attacking his body, and he has to know that you can't just put a dying brain into a dead person and somehow things are going to work. I realize that we're getting really into like some science fiction, but at the end of the day, he has to have some idea that his strategy is not going to work out in his favor. But it did also make me wonder too, right? If I'm Victor, right, and this dude who's dying of syphilis is like, "Hey man, I want to put my brain in there," right? Are you going to argue with him? Or are you just going to say, "Sure, no problem, I'll do that," and then you just dump him out, right? Like, what's the problem? Like, what is he going to know? Like,
well, keep in mind too. Well, Lee, keep in mind too, because this guy's been taking arsenic for, I'm assuming, for quite a while. So, not arsenic, mercury. And if you guys remember the Mad Hatter, I mean, the origin of the Mad Hatter was they used mercury to like shine the hats, and that made you a little bit loopy. So you kind of have to wonder, like, how much damage has that medication done to this guy's brain?
Sure. Yeah.
So how viable would it actually be if I actually did agree to go through with it and stick your brain in this creature, and then you end up, dying anyway?
Yeah. If I'm Victor and that guy's like, "Hey, put my brain in there," I'll be like, "Sure, no problem." And I'm thinking to myself, like, "Nah, man, that guy's gonna die before that brain ain't getting nowhere near there." So I mean, it's not like, what is he gonna do? He's not gonna know. Be like, "Well, I got to take your brain out anyway, so you're going to be dead no matter what. So
That's a good point.
it was always, like I said, it's just, I know nitpicking, right? It's just one of those things where, it made me question why he felt the need to include Harlander in this, right? Because this is a totally new character, right? Not in the books. Brendan, thank you for pointing out that you read this last year, so you can hopefully back us up on that. But this is a totally unique character, right? He's brought in. It does kind of, I would say, at least create a base for how Victor gets the funds to do all this, right? Though granted, he was really with a wealthy family already, so I didn't really buy that at the end of the day, because I'm like, well, if you're trying to say, hey, how does he get all this stuff? Well, he could just have family wealth, right? So they kind of bring him into the story, and as I watched it, now, I love Christoph Waltz. The man's amazing, right? If there was like something where like Christoph Waltz was like, hey, I'm just gonna read the ingredients on the back of like baking soda, I'd be like, perfect, sign me up for that. I'll listen to Christoph Waltz say anything. But his character, well, super well acted and has like some purpose for wanting all this to happen. It felt totally unneeded for the story the more I thought about it, because it's like, well, Victor already has an interest in doing this because of his mother, right? So there's already interest there. So it's not like Harlander is adding anything to that. And I mean, Victor has wealth. I know they talked about like how the wealth was destroyed or whatever. I don't know. But I mean, we still can say he has wealth. It just felt so, I don't know, odd to me to add his character, because it didn't really feel like it added anything to the overall story. Did anyone feel similar to that? Or do we feel like Harlander was like a good add as far as a unique character in Del Toro's vision?
I will say that is the second most common complaint I've heard about this, is the existence of Harlander in general. I was gonna say, when Luca mentioned the idea of if they had had a reason for Victor to need the money from him, if they had a definitive, my family has no more fortune,
Yes.
I simply don't have enough resources to do this, and then I think if they had kind of like what Luca mentioned, I think that's a really good idea for like a change that I would have made, where he was like, I will do this, not a favor from the future. I want you to put my dying brain in that. That would have created more of a moral conundrum for Victor. It could have created more, because it really is like they are buddy, 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 buddy. They have turned on each other. He's dead. Shit. Okay. I do think that would have been a bit more of an interesting character take, and given him a bit more reason to, frankly, be in the movie. Because I've heard a lot of people complain about his existence. I do like the idea that there's a little bit of a thing that it's not just money. He has, I don't remember the name, but the table that's got the nervous system on it.
The lymphatic system. Yeah.
So I think him giving access to that to Victor, and Victor is immediately like, oh my God, now I see, this is how this happens, this is how we can do this. I like that moment, because I'm like, okay, I see now how these two can come together and they could work kind of together towards something. But other than that, yeah, the existence of his character isn't, a super big thing. So I do get people have an issue with that. I also was going to say, Luca, when you mentioned the whimsical music for that, I think that is literally because we're supposed to be watching Victor do his thing, and to Victor, these aren't people.
Yes.
They really are just livestock. It's whimsical for him. It's just a Tuesday in the office. He's completely unfazed about the idea that he is, chopping people apart and putting them back together, and it's whatever. But yeah, I definitely get the second biggest complaint I hear is people talking about Christoph Waltz's character. It also, I think, doesn't help. This movie's, I think, a little long in the tooth. It's like 2.5 hours, and both times that I watched it, I'm like, it's too long, but I'm not 100% sure what I would cut. Everything that we saw, I'm like, well, this adds to this, this adds to this, this adds to this. I think we could have streamlined Victor's part of the story a bit more, because the monsters, the creatures, I don't know that I would change any of his. The prologue, I feel like that sets up too much for us, but actual Victor section, I'm like, I maybe would have streamlined a bit of this a bit more, and even just taking Harlan out of the equation already
100%
a bit of it down. So I think there's certainly an argument to, do we enjoy Christoph Waltz? Absolutely. Does he have some great fucking lines in this? Absolutely. Do we need him? Not necessarily.
Yeah, I think I said to Bradley actually when we were watching it last night, he feels more like a plot device than he does a character at times. He's already immersed in the medical community and this medical school there. He could have easily had access to this lymphatic system table through that. So I don't think you necessarily need the Harlander character for that. The other thing I mused about was whether or not, like, because they state that William was the favorite son, maybe the father's will bypassed Victor to William. So maybe he didn't have access to those funds. That's if that were the case, you would think that they would have like spelt that out a bit more, though. So it also doesn't make sense why Victor doesn't have access to, like, they call him Baron. He's minor royalty, basically, or landed gentry at the very least.
But at the same time, I mean, William seems to be, bend over backwards to do whatever Victor wants. So it's not like it's not like, if William did have access to all the funds and Victor didn't, it's not like William would just tell Victor, "Fuck off! I don't want you to touch my money."
Exactly.
He worked in finance, right? Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of characters that could have easily replaced Harlander and get us to the same conclusion without maybe, as you said, Bradley, maybe just cutting out some of the fat to condense it. Save 15 minutes there, make it a little bit more closer to that 2-hour mark.
I mean, I would say what they probably could have done was maybe they could have cut out all that tension that we see at the beginning of the movie where the soldiers are like, or the sailors are just like setting up a defense perimeter. I'm like, we really don't. I mean, we really don't need to see these guys
we knew that all these soldiers are crack shots. When we watched it last night, not a single one of them ever misses the creature. Every one of them firing these old ass style guns, no one misses him. And I'm like, damn, this is impressive. If this was like a modern movie, you'd see bullets flying and like tenth of them would actually hit what people are. I mean, granted, it is one creature moving in a direct line towards you, and he's fairly large. But I was like, man, not a single one of these dudes misses him. And I also really got a kick out of it. I think this movie has probably my favorite blunderbuss I've ever seen.
Yeah.
The fact it's got 4 hammers, I was like, that is the sickest shit I have ever seen. Because usually you think of a blunderbuss, you think of the one big wide barrel.
Yeah.
And that starts pulling those hammers back. I'm like, I am so into this. This is so cool.
Well, I guess we know what scenes Bradley wouldn't cut from this movie.
You definitely could speed up the Star Trek. Absolutely. There was some stuff about you like the building of the tension between the captain and the crew where they want to go home and he's like, no, we're going. But then at the end when he's like, okay, we're going back home, they all immediately, because I was telling Brendan, I was like, man, I can't believe this crew did not mutiny against him. The second saw that monster and they're like, bring him in, and the monster's like, give him to me. And the captain's like, no. I'd be like, the hell you mean no?
Well, not to mention too, the monster killed several of their mates as well. It's like, this thing killed several of our crew members. So maybe if you can we just like get the F out of Dodge? I mean, I would greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, Captain, look the other way. I'll chuck the leg first, and then I'll throw him overboard. I don't care. But yeah, I think this movie definitely could have. Usually, I am not one to say much about run length. I'm a big fan of one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given from a music teacher is people will wait if they're willing to wait if you make it worth their time.
Yes.
And this movie, for me, I will say I love this movie, but even in watching it more than once, I'm like, especially in Victor's section, I'm like, you could have cut some of this. Some of this, trimmed it up, speed it up. I definitely think, and yeah, if someone absolutely suggested cutting the beginning, I wouldn't be against it. Some of that you could have sped up a bit. I enjoy it, 4-hammer blunderbuss, hell yeah. I definitely do get wanting to maybe get to the actual story faster. Absolutely, I get that.
The one other thing I want to say, going back to Harlander real quick, is they also use him to give a justification for like how Victor comes across the bodies outside of just taking the prisoners as they're being hanged at the gallows. again, in the book, he didn't need that. He was just going around and picking out whatever spare parts he could get.
Yeah, I think
So,
the passage was he went to charnel houses and slaughterhouses.
yeah. So I don't think you needed any of that necessarily. I don't know. I'd love to know what Guillermo del Toro was thinking with like doing it this way. I don't know that it was necessary.
But to that point, Brandon, I think what Del Toro is doing is he's kind of leaning into the idea that Victor Frankenstein needs a helper, right? Because
Yeah.
in the classic 1932 one, Frankenstein's got Igor. Igor helps him in exhuming exhuming corpses from the cemetery, right? So
That's fair.
So Harlander. So if you think about it, he's kind of leaning into past Frankenstein movies, because even when Harlander falls and cracks his head after he says, "I would just put my brain in the creature's body," it's kind of a nod to the Hammer version of Frankenstein from back in the day, right?
That's fair.
So he is kind of dipping into and paying homage to previous iterations of Frankenstein. But again, I mean, is it enough to justify Harlander's presence in the movie? I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I don't think so, but I get why he did it. I will also say there's an imagery thing with Harlander, where when we see his body, he's laid on that giant block of ice.
Yep.
And we see a few of those giant blocks earlier with him like sliding them. I just really like the imagery of these giant blocks of ice. Like I don't know. There's just something about that. I'm like, I find this very aesthetically pleasing. Just boring. Because we have like morgues where they've got the big tables that you pull out. I like the idea back then. They're just like, nah, just drop it on a giant block of ice. It's fine. Kind of like that.
Yep. So, all right, let's wrap up with some Victor's part really quick, right? Because I know we've kind of talked a lot about this. Is I want to get to kind of the creatures part, which is also a new kind of look at it. But for Victor's, right? So we have, the experiment happens. Harlander is killed, right? Victor kind of, makes the creation, right? Initially thinks that it's a failure, but then wakes up and the creature's just kind of sitting there standing over him. That would freak the shit out of me, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Having like a 7-foot guy, as Luca said, wearing a man diaper, just sitting there. I guess also Luca probably good for that PG feel, right? To like kind of help kind of up all the good bits there. Unlike what we saw with what was it, 28 years later?
God.
The shit,
Yeah, 28 years later. I watched this last night. I was asking Brendan multiple questions about, okay, look, do you think he got the junk all from one body? Do you think he gave them junk? Do you think he went one by one and is like, I don't like this one, I don't like this one, this one is completely, let's take this one. And I was like, you got a question about
asking the important.
I personally don't think he gave him, the crown jewels. I'm just saying.
Oh, so he's like a Ken doll.
Well, he does mention later on, he's like, what next? Procreation? I'm like, oh my God, he gave him a dick and he made sure it worked. Oh my God.
Bradley, not only did he gave him the accoutrements, as it were, to do the job properly, as it were.
Maybe some things are better left in Del Toro's mind as far as maybe what direction we want to go there. So
the only non-PG thing he included.
But yeah, the creature pops up at the edge of his bed, right? And we see, Victor trying to teach the creature everything, right? And I think we've talked about this a lot, but I mean, there's a ton of good points, right? About, I would say one of the concerns I had was just not being clear with the passage of time, right? How long has this been going on for? Because we see how quickly, or at least on screen, right? We see how quickly Victor kind of turns on his creation, right? We see him start to braid him similar to how his father was braiding him as a youth. We see Victor doing the same thing to the creature. And eventually we have Elizabeth and William show up at the cliff tower. And we see Elizabeth there ends up hearing the creature and goes to investigate and finds the creature down there. Now, of course, like with her, her interest in the macabre is very clear. Like she's been out there, she's seen Victor experimenting on people. So she very much is cool with all of this. Probably a lot more so than I would imagine most people nowadays would be around dead bodies, but she's totally cool with it. And we see her have this, very interesting interaction with the creature, right? And I I had to ask this question, right? Because I went online and there's a bunch of comments where people are like, hey, is Elizabeth's care for the creature, is it more motherly, or was she thinking a little bit something else there with the creature?
Well,
So
Lee,
it's a stupid question, right, to the group. But what we think about Elizabeth's relationship with the monster, or the creature, excuse me, what are we thinking about?
Lee, can I
Right, look.
refer you to Creature Commandos, where Dr. Frankenstein has the hots for the
That's
bride?
true. Yeah,
So-
that's true. That's true. That's a thing.
I will use that example as my answer. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, had it been any other director, I wouldn't have the question. But after Shape of Water,
Yes.
Guillermo del Toro was like, "Look, sometimes you just want to fuck the monster." So, like, I think it's maybe a little more like that. When she meets him, though, it makes me think of oh God, Halloween Ends, when Corey and the granddaughter see each other and they're giving each other bedroom eyes in like 0.2
Mhm.
seconds after meeting each other. I'm like, that's a bit fast. This a little bit like that. They see each other and they're like, Bolton Town, got it. I'm like, that's a bit more. Yeah, if it had been any other director, I'd be like, no, it's probably more of a motherly thing. Guillermo del Toro, I'm like, all right, look, we know how he operates. We know what he's into. I think it's more than motherly.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been going back and forth on this one since we first watched the movie, on and off, because I'm like, I don't know what they were going for. I think when we were driving back from the theater that night, I said to Brad, like, I don't know what they were doing with Elizabeth and the creature. Like, I just don't know. But talking about it a little bit more earlier, I feel like I'm leaning more towards the maternal side at this point, especially because of how innocent Jacob Elordi plays the creature when he first comes in. It would feel a little weird otherwise at that point. Like, he's just so childlike and innocent up until the point that he's run off from the old man's cabin and he starts to learn about the world. So for me, I feel like it's more on the maternal side, but it is a little weird, like how unclear it is.
To your point, later talking to Victor about make me a companion, he doesn't say make me a mate. He does say make me a companion. And Victor is the one who's like, what next? Procreation. So, in fairness to your point, even when he's talking about someone to be with, to spend his life with, the creature isn't necessarily at least talking about it in a physical sense or a sexual sense. So I could see that.
yeah, it's basically Victor implying rather than the creature explicitly stating what he wants, right?
Yeah, and we know that. I always think back to, right, so we're talking about Mia Goth, who plays both, that plays multiple characters in this, right, and the fact that we know that William, right, the younger brother, was kind of the ended up becoming the favorite later on, right, and I think I'd imagine there's some jealousy there from Victor's standpoint that, oh, this, Croatia's now getting all this attention that, I've been looking for from Elizabeth, and now it's kind of turned around. So, but it did make it, like I said, very interesting, where I was just like watching, I'm like, you know what? I shouldn't be thinking the thoughts I'm thinking of as far as why she's looking at the creature the way she's looking at the creature, but I just couldn't stop myself. So, but thank you. It sounds like we're like kind of like almost split as far as who's going to bang the creature and who's just going to, kind of watch over the creature, make sure she's okay. So, but we see that after everything happens with the creature here, Victor ends up blaming the creature for the death of Harlander, right? Which we know is obviously false. Harlander was unfortunately died via an accident. And Victor decides he wants to kill his experiment, right? An experiment that he deems a failure. And this is kind of where Victor's story ends. And I wanted to kind of get everyone's feelings about Victor's character, right? Because I kind of look at it and I think back to the book, right? Where Victor's character, I would say, was much more morally gray, right? from the book, right? We're kind of uncertain about what his notions are. To your point, Brendan, right? Like he sees the creature, he immediately decides like, hey, I'm way over my head. I need to stop this, right? And there's practically no interaction there. Whereas in this, we see him, we see him be fascinated by his creation, and then it feels like, and this is the problem, Bradley, as you said, with the passage of time. I don't know if he's just like given up after a week and he's just like, hey, you know what? I did what I wanted to do, but I didn't really think about everything else, right? Like I was just here just to show that I can, reanimate an undead person. I wasn't here to like teach it and have to like show it how to be a human. So I feel like there's so many things that maybe he wasn't thinking about. He was just like, hey, cool, I did it. Now that I did it, I don't know what to do with it, right? Like I created something amazing, but I just don't know how to deal with it now. And for
Good
me, as
scientist, terrible parent.
Yes, exactly, right? Yeah, look how that works, right?
Well, also keep in mind too, because William also tells Victor, I've got these documents here that I can get you reinstated with the Academy, right?
Yes,
because the whole point, of Victor doing that display at the Academy was to kind of get, I guess, not approval, but sort of acceptance or an acknowledgement of what is possible, right? Before Ralph Ineson and everybody in the theater kind of like blows their top and says, this is a violation of nature and God's law, right? So at that point, you kind of have to wonder, he's not really doing it for validation anymore, like he did when he was in London or Edinburgh. He's doing it for himself, and now he's realizing, shit, I actually can't make this work, so I'm just gonna burn it all down.
Yeah.
Yep. Is that the origin story for? Because that you're right. That is the Ralph Ineson is the one that does it's also Galactus, which super cool voice. But yeah, I don't know. What did everyone think about Victor? Because I felt like he's kind of this mad scientist type of person, right? That wants to do something totally out there, and he's smart enough to be able to do it. But it's frustrating how many times I kind of just see his character always just feel like it's not really going about the right way. It just feels like there's this very clear sense of like he's supposed to be truly the monster, right? As opposed to the creature. And I feel like that ambiguity made the original work so interesting. And this, I felt like it almost cheapened it because Victor just constantly did things that's hard to really root for him, right? Hey, you did all this, but then you see him, abuse the creature. And then you see him, what I would perceive his jealousy that the creature has this interest in Elizabeth, whatever interest it is, right? Not going to get into all the whatever we want to think about what's going on there. But there's jealousy for it, and it just seems like it's so reactionary just to kind of blow it all up and not want to deal with it. So what's everyone's take on Victor in this depiction of it?
I think there's one line in particular that I really caught last night that kind of, I think, put into perspective for me the way that Victor views himself versus the creature, maybe even versus everyone, with the sense of superiority he has. When the creature cuts his hand on the straight razor, and then he goes to touch Victor, Victor screams, "Don't touch me," which I feel like is a fairly, this dude's hand is gashed open, it's bleeding like crazy, and he's trying to touch Victor's face. I'd probably be like, hey, bro, maybe don't touch. He says, "Don't touch me, don't ever touch me."
Yeah.
In adding the "don't ever touch me," I'm like, that is a much more definitive statement than just "don't touch me now because your hand is bloody." It's a little closer to "don't ever lay your hands on me. I'm better than you. You're lower than me." He does get so annoyed when he's cutting his hair and he keeps moving. The way that he talks down to the creature consistently. He never misses a chance to talk down to this creature after the first interaction. And when I mentioned earlier about when he is going to definitively kill him, he says one word, "Give me one word." He says, "Make me save you." I was like, bro, you're putting it all on a creature that more or less has the brain of a child right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he says Elizabeth, he definitively goes, the only thing in like Victor's part of the story, because this movie does have like the big words that come on the screen. It's like preludes, and it's like part one, Victor, part two.
Yeah.
The only thing that he does at in Act 1 that I'm like, this is a little bit maybe redeeming, is he does try to run back in.
Yeah.
That's the one thing where I'm like, first off, stupid. You know damn good well what's going to happen when you open that door. But the fact that you do see him have like a human moment there. We do get a little bit later on where Victor says, like, I've broken out of my I don't even insanity, maybe. So I do kind of like the idea that he was so into his work that he forgot how to be a human. But then later on, we kind of see him, he goes so into his rage and so intent on killing this creature that he's, hunting / avoiding this creature all across the earth into the Arctic. So I'm like, he's a weird character where if there was a definitive switch, if that was the moment where he stops, he goes to go back in, he's a human again instead of just a scientist, I think I could have rolled with that a little better. If he had maybe been more upset about the death of his brother, if he had been, because he just doesn't seem human for a lot of this. He seems very unfazed by literally anyone dying except his mom. A lot to say about that, but it really is like, even the creature, he doesn't treat the creature like a human, but he really doesn't treat anyone with that much sympathy, empathy. Honestly, even when Elizabeth dies, he's just sort of, eh. I mean, he's the one who kills her. So yeah, Victor, there's a lot of weird stuff with him where he's kind of flip-floppy back and forth. But for the end of the Act 1, I do kind of like the fact that he tries to go back in. Again,
yeah, that's a good point.
But I do like that he has that heel turn at the end. And then pretty much from there on out, we see him. Everything he does from there on out, I think, is pretty reactionary. He doesn't go after the creature. The creature shows up. The creature attacks Elizabeth, and he goes to shoot her in. See, I'm telling you, all those dudes in the beginning, crack shots. Victor, horrible shot. That dude had friendly fire turned on, and
he is a scientist after all. He's not really adept at firearms.
So yeah, everything that he does later on becomes very reactionary. So, he doesn't have a whole lot of character to add up until that last scene. Everything from the end of his to there, he's just reactionary to whatever happens. So I think that's a thing where maybe character writing, I would have changed it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I do kind of like the idea of thinking him more as he is so much a scientist, he forgot how to be a human. That's me.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add to that. I think the major shortcomings are in the writing, in the sense that they very clearly were on the side of, oh, Victor's the monster, so he's going to have this mania. He's going to be going so hard into his experiments that he's going to forget everything else except for his pursuit of Elizabeth because of his Oedipal issues. And then he's going to just kind of... There was really no way you were going to end up liking this character the way it was written.
Yes.
So and that is a bit of a turn from the novel, because you do at least see Victor's perspective in everything, and you do at least maybe not necessarily like him, but you understand where he's coming from in the novel.
I have a quick question for you about the novel, because we were talking about it a bit last night, where there was a lot of stuff I didn't know happened. Is the big difference, do you think it's that in the novel Victor is more likable, more relatable, or do you think a lot of it is the creature is less likable, less the definitive good guy? Is it maybe like they even out a bit more just because they even out, or is it that Victor gets more likable, or the monster, I keep saying monster, the creature comes down a bit in likability? Because in this, I feel like he's very likable in this movie.
Well, the creature does. Well, in the novel, the creature does. I wouldn't say purposely kills, but he does murder William, who in the novels portrayed as he's a lot younger, right? He's more like He's more like what Brendan, like 7 or 8?
Yeah, he's only about 7 or 8 years old at
Yeah.
that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. The creature's tale in the novel is very much more of the tragic fall of man kind of story. It's very much he starts off the innocent as he's born, and then as he learns more about the world, he becomes more corrupted. The same
Yeah,
way
because in the novel, the creature leans very much into Paradise Lost, where he kind of compares himself to Milton's Lucifer, who's like, well, I was cast out of paradise and by my own creator, so this is the best way I can sort of get back to getting back to, well, in Lucifer's case, he's getting back at God by corrupting Adam and Eve. Here, the creature is, if I, because you've hurt me, I'm going to take away everything that you've loved, starting with your little brother. And then it becomes a chain reaction, because then the maid Justine, she kind of gets accused of killing William, and then she gets hanged. And I mean, to the novel's credit, I mean, they kind of portray Victor as guilty, by sin of omission, right? He's had multiple opportunities to kind of step forward and say, I know who did this, but at the same time, you can sort of understand this is a society that isn't thinking as progressively as we do today, because we're armed with the vocabulary, the knowledge of what is possible, right? Even in the realm of fiction. Whereas in that society, if Victor came out and said, "Oh yeah, I created this creature from a bunch of dead body parts, and now he's running around trying to, get revenge on me by killing all the people that I love," people will probably look at him and say, "Well, should we take you to a sanitarium or what?" So either way, I mean, if Victor had come out and come clean and told the truth, he still would have ended up suffering all the tragedies that he ends up suffering, because it's just too fantastical for anybody to believe.
Yeah.
Yep. So once we get done with Victor's part of the story, right, we get that transition over into the creatures, and we see back on the ship, right, where this is all happening. Not only, like I said, the ship has very little to do with the actual story, but it's where everything is kind of experiencing. So the creature's now gotten aboard the ship, and now the creature tells us its side of the story, or kind of continues the story from where we left off with Victor.
I just hold on. Don't you think
very nicely, right?
Wait, don't you think it's kind of funny that the creature just knows where to pick up?
Yeah, look, man, creature's got good ears, right? He found the
best.
Damn,
that's a good point. Actually, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, like he picks up exactly where that part of the story lets off. So now we get kind of the creature's, I guess, version of events, or what it's been doing all this time. So we see the creature; it survives the explosion at the cliff tower, and I have to admit, I kind of laughed at one part as we see the creature, because it is just so pure. It is just like sitting there. It's feeding a deer, right? And I almost want to say, like, is it a Disney princess? Like, did I miss something? Are we going to start seeing the creature show up and like it's look like an abomination, and it's going to join our Disney princess cast? Because it's just sitting there. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's feeding a deer. Like, I know you're trying to drive the point home, right? It's not lost upon me that, the creature is very much a product of its environment, right? I know what you're going for, but can you just tone it down just a little bit, so he's not literally feeding deer's food. And unfortunately, the deer gets shot in the head. Immediately made me think of My Cousin Vinny when she's going through the rant of, little deers going down to the little lake with his little deer lips, and bam, shot in the head. It made me think about that. But
I was thinking of Bambi when I saw that scene.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, Bambi, perfect. Yeah, whatever deer killing analogy or movie you want to create it to, absolutely kind of fits the mold here. So I like how he just gets this jacket and he's like with the deer, and immediately just people are coming shooting at the deer. And I like how the shooters, the deer is right next to the monster. Like, I don't know if I was there. I know which thing I would shoot first, and it would be the really weird cloaked figure that's 7 feet tall. That would probably be my first target before I shot the deer. But you know, it is what it is with that. So the creature flees from this, right? And it ends up being in this like shed, right, of this like little house out in the middle of nowhere. We see the creature. It starts to kind of watch over the family that lives there, right, all in secret. Once again, I like how he's like mice running all over him, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's just like, you know, like just tone it down just a little bit, right? But you know, we see him there, and this is where he kind of like helps learn, and he starts to, I think, kind of see what good humanity looks like, right? Because he's sitting there, he wants to support them. They start to, you know, he goes out and like, you know, gets them all this stuff and like makes a little pen and everything like that. So you kind of see this really, you know, I think very cool dynamic where you see him, you know, understanding what it's like to get approval, right? Approval that he never got from his quote unquote master, as they're kind of working on stuff. Even though they don't know it's him, they think it's like, oh, it's the
Spirit of the forest.
Of the forest, right? So you know, that's what's helping us, and so he ends up, you know, following them, and he ends up befriending the blind patriarch of the family, right? I want to mention he's blind because obviously, you know, if it was a person with eyesight, you know, would have ran away. So luckily, he ran into a blind guy at this day and age, you know, this is where he like learns to talk, learns to read. I even think he like reads Paradise Lost, which I mean that's a hell of a thing to get into.
Well, I mean, there was a meta moment where he reads Ozymandias, and that was written by Percy Shelley, the husband of Mary Shelley.
Yep, very good call out. Yep, so.
Dude, I told Brendan last night, I'm like, this poor guy, when we were a kid, we were learning to read, we're like, the cat in the hat had a bat. This had to read the word. He's like, I am yes. I'm like,
I mean, it's kind of appropriate, too, because the famous line, "Look upon my work, ye mighty in despair." I mean, obviously that applies to Victor, but in this case, it's Victor who's despairing, and not the poor monster, because the poor monster kind of gets that sense of superiority later on, where he's like, "I'm better than you. Look, I can shrug off blunderbuss shots and throw 6 men into the ice without flinching."
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And then so he befriends our blind patriarch that has all these really amazing books. I won't even question that. So it doesn't exactly seem like a real scholarly area, but I guess I shouldn't, pass judgment on anything. As he's there, a bunch of wolves attack and ends up killing the blind guy as the creature was off going to the cliff tower to try to find more about his origin and where he's from. So the creature comes back just in time to find the guy dying, and just as the guy dies, a bunch of people, the other family members, show up and attack the creature. The creature does kill one of them, which I always thought was kind of peculiar to me, right? Because, I felt like he's, kind of learned a lot. And I feel like this is him kind of maybe showing, hey, humanity's not all bad. And maybe trying to understand a little bit more about that. So it was weird that there's 3 people that come in, only one of them gets like the jaw ripped off, and the other 2 just kind of are left alive. I don't know. I always thought that was kind of weird how that interaction happened.
Did you guys notice which one died? The one that died was the one who was not a member of that family.
Was it the same guy who took a shot at him earlier?
So there were 3 guys. When we first see the hunters, there are 2 of them. They are the 2 kind of taller, not as older guys. Then when they get to the house, there's a shorter, he's a little heavier set guy. He's the one that gets his jaw just fucking ripped off. And then later on, when we see the scenes of the family, he's the only one of the 3 that's not there. I think he's another hunter. I think he's off with like another group that joins them. But anytime we see the family together as a family, he's the only one of those 3 that's not there. The other 2 guys are.
Yeah, so he kind of sees him as an interloper because the monster kind of sees himself as part of the family.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the one of the 3 that dies is the only one that I don't believe is part of that family.
But that's a conscious choice that he makes too. I mean, it's not because if he really was going off instinct, he would have gone, after anybody in the family. But I think it kind of makes that decision. I'm going to go after this guy in particular because him I don't know. The others, they're related to the blind guy that just died.
That dude also was stupid to bum rush a 9-foot giant with like, bro, you kind of brought this upon yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not good tacticians. They're definitely not good tacticians there. So
I am curious about the choice to include the wolves and all that stuff in here, because that's not in the book.
No.
Either. The book they just go off, I think, for the winter. The family does, and leaves, and the old man stays behind, and then they have their bonding time. And then the family comes back, sees him, and he gets run off. There's not any of that information there. So I'm curious what the thought process was behind that.
Does the old man die in the book?
No.
See, I feel like you got to have him die. If you want to tell this story and you want to have the monster, creature, keep saying the monster. If you want to have him feel the loss, I don't think him getting run off is enough. I think he has to see his friend die. Super depressing thing to say, but from a story writing standpoint, I feel like he's got to have the actual loss, not just the loss of friendship, but the true loss of his friend. The wolves, I think, was a kind of convenient way to do it. Also, from a movie enjoyment standpoint, I think it got a couple cool gore shots that they wanted. I mean, dude, he freaking skins that one wolf. Like, Jesus. I was telling Brendan, I'm like, I can't believe that third wolf attacked him. If I was in a fight with a bunch of dudes and I saw someone skin one of my guys and throw him at me, you seriously think I'm going to attack him? I'm like, wow, peace out, bro. You the alpha. Oh,
That's a fair point. You probably do need the old man to die in that situation for this story. You're right about that. I don't. And the wolves do look cool. The wolves do look good, but I don't know. It's a odd choice for me anyway, especially with him killing the third guy in the end. Like, that's fair. If you want the creature to be as innocent and as pure as you're depicting him, it's a weird choice to have him kill the guy, even if they're trying to kill him.
Yes. Yeah. That was my hang up as well. I totally agree with you on that one, Brendan, because that was like, hey, if we're trying to go for this angle, and you can look at it, the wolves, right? They attack to get food, and the humans have to kill them because they're trying to save themselves, right? So he sees this interaction happening and understands, like, hey, sometimes you have to kill to protect the people that you care about. Yeah. Whereas in this, like, he should understand that, like, hey, there's a dead guy here, right? Great, right? It's not his fault that he's dead, right? But there's a dead guy here, right? You have to understand, after all this time, you're in hide. You know that your mere presence is going to spark concerns there. So when a bunch of people come in, you have to kind of unfortunately know, right? Not agreeing that people should pull out the pitchforks when they see you, but that's unfortunately the reaction you're going to get. So I think if you killing one of them, to me, was just like, God, such a weird thing to go about doing. Now, Bradley, that was really interesting because I couldn't really tell because they're wearing all the stuff on their face, so a lot of their face is obscured on some of them. That's a really interesting point that you brought up, that it's not one of them that was the family that was killed. So that does kind of put it in a little bit of a different light. But for me personally, it just feels like you don't kill anybody and you go about your business to, kind of conclude your part of the story. Just for myself.
Now that part is fair. I will say the only reason I noticed the difference was because of hair color. He's the only one. He's got blondish, whitish hair. Yeah. And the other two guys have really dark brown hair. That's, I think, the only reason I noticed it. But Brendan also made a good point last night. When they get back, they see multiple dead wolves in this house.
Yes.
And one of them half skinned. They don't think, hey, bud. I don't know. But it also goes back to them when they first see him. And you mentioned that if you saw that thing standing next to the deer, literally they shoot the deer. He stands up. One of them says, "What is that? I don't know." They do not have the mental capacity to be like, huh, I wonder what this is. Huh, that looks like a man. Earlier, they're like, what is that? The other guy's like, I don't know. Shoot that thing. They don't take the time. No time for questions.
It is a pure instinct thing to go and just shoot it because they don't recognize it as actual human. So
That's fair.
Yeah, but it's wearing a coat and everything. I mean, you would think that's a man.
I've got a gun. We're like 60 feet apart. I'm feeling pretty good. I've got a gun. You're wearing a coat. In the forest. You were just feeding a deer. I'm pretty good. I've got you. But what is that? I don't know. Shoot it. Cool. Whatever.
They also have the high ground, right? And that's very critical for us.
That's true. Yeah.
We can talk about the fact that you got Doug Bradley playing a nice character for possibly the second time in cinematic history.
Mm-hmm.
He played such a douchebag. He plays such a kind character in this. And I do think that he's a very nice character to have in this. And yeah, unfortunately, I do kind of think from a story standpoint, if you want the creature to get where you want him to get, this guy's doomed. You just know he's dead. I will also say the start of this. So the what is it? Jacob Elordi is the guy who plays the creature.
Yeah.
I was blown away by him. I was terrified going into this. I'm like, man, they're just gonna get some like big guy. They're just gonna get some WWE looking dude, and he's gonna be a shit actor, and I'm gonna have to suffer through this because they want the size. But this dude is 6'6", which first off, damn, that's taller than me. But I thought he was incredible, and the prosthetic stuff they have on him, I think looks really, really good 90 to 95% of the time.
I mean, it looks like something from Body Worlds. I will say that.
That's a really good point. Like, I like that it looked clearly this is not a regular human. I don't need it to be super over the top. I like the idea that, because really it is a human, kind of. It's made up of human parts. It should look like a person, but with the scars. And the only two times I can think of in this where the color of it really bothered me were both times where he's just out in sunlight and it's really hitting him. When we first see him on the ground after the explosion, I'm like, you're blue. Like so much. You look like one of the zombies from the original Dawn of the Dead. Like it's a color that looks so fake that it kind of takes me out of it a bit. And unfortunately, the second moment is right after Victor dies at the end and he is on the ship and he like looks up at the sky. I'm like, okay, you look really blue again. When they get it a little more skin colored and dark gray, and they do a great job, like you mentioned earlier, about him being covered up. That coat does a lot of heavy lifting for covering his prosthetics in this. His hair does a lot of heavy lifting for covering a lot of it. I think he looks great for the majority of it, but there is that one moment in the beginning of his section, one moment at the end where I'm like, it looks a little bad. But this is another great thing where the passage of time, we see his hair growing to be really long, so we get a really good sense of how long he's been here. And then Doug Bradley playing a nice character just floors me.
Because in the book, Brendan, I mean, Victor describes that the skin is like sort of yellowish here, whereas here he looks like he's devoid of life. And it's been a while since I took high school anatomy, but my understanding is with the circulation of blood, you kind of develop like a more rosy kind of color, because when you blush, that's when all the blood is going to your head. You would figure he'd look a little bit more natural, like Robert De Niro did in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, right?
Yeah.
Whereas here it's like he looks like that creature from Alien Romulus. I'm sorry to make that comparison, but he looks like that creature. I'm sorry, Lee, but
that's nightmare fuel. I don't like this now. Nope, don't say that.
But that's appropriate though, given that the subtitle of Frankenstein is the modern Prometheus.
Yeah,
so. That's true. Yep, that's true. Very on brand. So, but yeah. So we got after the whole incident with the wolves, the creature ends up fleeing and goes to ultimately meet Victor, because a bunch of addresses that were found in the cliff tower, so he knows where Victor is, and so he goes and is there to meet Victor, and it happens to be on William and Elizabeth's wedding day, right? So we have,
You picked
I know,
the worst
timing.
time.
I was gonna say, like, I like, for a creature who's only been made, like, who's only been around for, like, let's say, like, a few months, he's got a pretty good sense of geography. Like, he really knows how to get around, and he's got a
Well, I
perfect
said
sense of
the
timing
first time
too.
we watched this, I'm like, man, he figured out addresses really fucking quick.
I mean, because he's got a book of addresses. He doesn't even have a map or anything, and I'm sure he's not stopping people along the way. He's like, "Excuse me, do you know the way to Geneva or wherever he happens to be?" Not to mention too, like, because, like, in the novel, like, he's not, he starts off kind of dumb, but he kind of becomes this, like, well-spoken, eloquent, character as the story progresses, which I give props to Jacob Elordi, because he's not playing him as like a dumb creature like Boris Karloff did, but he's giving us something that's a bit more substantial. And I would even say he does a far better job than, again, Robert De Niro did in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And and as I'm watching the movie, I'm thinking, God, if you could have put him against Kenneth Branagh's Victor Frankenstein, holy shit, that would have been a really, really good movie right there.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I mean,
because even if Victor Frankenstein's like, I'm more superior than you, it kind of gets to that point where it's like, whether he wants to admit it or not, it's like, the creature has sort of come to the same level as the master in some way, right?
Yeah.
I like to think that maybe just one of the dead body parts that he got, it was just like a guy as a cartographer. So, like, he just knew where everything is through, like, just getting that information. That's just how it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, so the creature meets Frankenstein on Elizabeth and William's wedding day, and I like how there's this kind of fight or altercation, right? Because true to form, right? The creature wants to have a companion, someone to share his life with, because he can't die. So he's interested in doing that. Obviously, Victor has some different ideas about what he wants to do, which kind of conflict with that. And I like how Elizabeth shows up, right, for this confrontation, and Victor's just like, oh, you know what? I'm going to shoot the monster because it's worked so well in the past. So, I try to blow it up. I try to blow it up at the cliff tower. Now I'm going to try to shoot it, and Elizabeth gets killed, right? So Elizabeth dies, and then everyone shows up, and Victor's like, "Oh, the creature did it," because the creature's just like using guns now or something, I guess.
Yeah, he's like holding the gun, waving it, being like, "The creature shot her."
Yeah, it's amazing. So, so the creature, he kind of attacks a bunch of the people that are going after him. One of them being William, who gets killed as well. So William gets killed, and he takes the dying body of Elizabeth with him, and like finds some, I don't know, some cave that he just kind of drops her in, and they have this little moment together before she dies. And that was the moment where I'm like, you could get more towards this gray ambiguity if you play this a little bit differently, right? Because to me, like, if you have Victor here and he clearly kills Elizabeth, like, that ends any, like, morally gray, for me at least. That was the end of his whole thing. Now, you could have played it where maybe there's an altercation and maybe the creature, he accidentally kills Elizabeth, and maybe that triggers the creature, or excuse me, maybe that triggers Victor to become obsessed with killing him because he killed Elizabeth, right? So I think that there was an opportunity there where maybe you could have had this maybe converge a little bit more, where the creature's like, well, it's good, but then it makes a mistake and kills people, and then Victor is out there trying to do something else. But I think the path that they go with, it just makes it so clear that Victor is supposed to be the villain, right? And obviously this is a stark contrast to the original one, right? Because in the book, right, the creature kills Elizabeth, right? That's a part of the whole thing, is that he's like, hey, cool, I'm going to wait to when Victor and Elizabeth gets married, I'm going to kill her on your wedding night. Now, obviously, Ring's very different. But I think this is probably where it really kind of went in a very, very different direction from what I was kind of expecting. And I think this is where they made it very clear that this was going to be a good versus bad guy type of situation. So
Well, keep in mind too, like as we've said throughout this review, I mean, Victor is pretty much detached from humanity, right?
Yes, that's true.
He doesn't really have that much of a connection. I mean, because with William, he kind of sees him more as a means than actual family. And Elizabeth, it's a sort of weird obsession where it's like you're not really Elizabeth, you're just a mere reflection of my mother, my late mother. So he's not really so I don't really understand like what his motivation would be to go after the creature. Whereas, to your point in the book, he does care about his family members, right? So when Elizabeth does get killed, that's the straw that breaks the camel's back, and he's like,
yeah,
fuck this, I'm gonna find you, I'm gonna hunt you down, and I'm gonna kill you. Whereas here it's like, I'm just gonna go ahead and pursue you. And I'm like, okay, well, I get the feeling you don't really like your family members that much either way, so why are you going to go after the creature? Because he killed Elizabeth and he killed William. Well, technically, you killed Elizabeth and then the creature accidentally killed William.
Yeah, I do think also bonus points, because when he starts attacking Victor, dude, he launches Victor through four post bed like it was nothing. I'm like, man, Victor's got some strong ass backbones to be able to stand up after that.
Well, keep in mind too, because he's got like an artificial leg as well. So I mean,
yeah,
there's not much he's going to be able to do, really.
Yeah, but there is it does suck that like I think 3 or 4 people come up and grab the creature, and when he pushes him back, of course William's the only one who honks his head and dies from it. But I think William is maybe the most tragic character in this, because every interaction he has with Victor, I feel like you can tell he cares about him. Like he really does. He wants to see him do well. He does all of this work for him. He never complains. And even in the start of this chunk of scenes, when he's like, get up, it's my wedding day, just the way he's acting around him is it's almost like cute. Like it really does seem like he wants to be his brother. He cares about him.
But it's a one-sided relationship, though. That's the thing.
Do what?
No, I was gonna say, but it's a one-sided relationship, really.
Oh, one-sided. And I feel so bad as William's dying, and he even says, like, I was scared of you, and it's so sad. William, I think, is just such a sweet person, such a sweet character. He just had his freaking wife get shot 5 seconds before he gets murdered, and Victor just grabs a gun and goes. Like he kind of like has a little bit of a moment, but that's it. And he never mentions William again. I'm like, God, this is William's so tragic. He was such a sweet child. So it is very interesting as well to hear, because I will say I have not read the book. I once did a book report on it and got an A despite not having read the book.
We certainly took a lot out of the book, so that's good.
But hearing that he was so much younger in the books, I could see a little bit of in this, especially when watching it last night, the wedding day. I'm like, he's acting like a very excited, giddy young man, and then you've got Victor just put on my prosthetic leg. Like, okay, yeah, you guys are very clearly different ends of the spectrum. But it is so freaking tragic that he gets murdered, and Victor's like, well, okay, I'm done.
Let me ask you this then. Like, I mean, could you sort of see Elizabeth as a tragic figure as well? Because because for the most part, she's kind of like a mirror image of Victor in the fact that she's interested in like the macabre, all these things macabre, but at the same time, we really don't see that much fleshed out of her, really.
Yeah, I think the most you get from her, it's a little hard to say about tragic, just because as she's dying, which by the way, she got gut shot by a revolver from this era, and she's not breathing hard. She's not, bro, those things fired balls the size of like 50-cent pieces. Girl, you hurting. But when she's like laying on the rock, by the way, this cave is the most perfect. This cave was specifically designed to bring a dying woman, to set her on the stone in the middle, to have the light. Like, it is the most obnoxiously perfect cave.
Again, leading into the Gothic tropes.
Yeah, it's true. As soon as you go in, you're like, he's putting that body right there, guarantee it. But she's telling the creature about, I never felt like I was meant for this world. I tried to fit in, but just never could. And you're like, it is tragic, but it also feels like she's strangely okay with it. Like it's this weird peace with death, even her own death, that her being here with him, she's like, this is fine. Again, completely unfazed by the fact she got gut shot.
It's kind of I remember saying this too when we were coming back from watching it in the movie theater the first time. It feels like they were kind of trying to do the same thing that Eggers did in Nosferatu, with Lily Rose Depp's character, and it just was not done nearly as well. She's very much supposed to be this intelligent and ethereal, but out of time, out of place sort of character to me, and then it just sort of doesn't translate because we don't get enough of her.
I was gonna say we don't get enough time to see that.
Yeah. Well, also too because in Nosferatu, Ellen she does it in a sacrificial way. She understands what the risks are and what's going on. Whereas she's sort of initiating the scene where she allows Nosferatu to drain her blood so that he can get exposed to sunlight and die. Whereas here, it's almost like a reaction. It's like, well, this is what happened to me. I'm going to make my peace with it. So it's not really on the same level because she's not really sacrificing herself for a greater cause, as it were.
Yeah.
You're talking more about the characterization than the end.
It feels very much like they're trying to do the same thing character-wise with her in some ways, but they're not achieving it nearly as well.
Yeah. That's fair.
I like that. So so unfortunately Elizabeth dies in her perfectly created cave just for her moment. And we have pretty much the creature and Victor pretty much are like, hey, look, we're just gonna have to duke this out, right? I want to die, but I'm gonna torture you the whole way doing it. And that's what kind of brings both the creature and Victor out into the Arctic. And we're on the boat, right? The boat that is just kind of out there to generate the story. And we have this, I would say still touching moment, right? Where the creature and Victor kind of get together, with Victor being mortally wounded. The creature kind of, has this moment where they both kind of apologize, right, for everything that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a little bit of, kind of this apology that happens. What I thought was interesting, and the more I kind of thought about it, it made me kind of curious about the boat, right? Which is really weird because the boat has no purpose in the story. But it was interesting that for the boat, right, they're up there stuck. I did like the idea that the creature unstuck the boat as a way of showing like, hey, cool, I want to help support humanity again, is how I kind of interpreted it after seeing everything that happened. Where he's like, hey, you know what? I've turned my back a lot. I've, had this kind of interactions with people. I've kind of like lost faith in what people are and what they could do because of everything I've witnessed. So to have him kind of had that moment where he's like, hey, cool, I'll send you guys on your way, I think was nice. But with that being said, it just, I don't know. It's just weird to me that as we got to the end, I just felt like these two characters were too far apart. And their kind of, I guess, reconciliation at the end, I just don't know how meaningful it was to me. It just felt like there's been so many bridges burned along the way. It was hard for me to see where it kind of wrapped up. But that's just me personally. I'll let you guys talk about the end here before we get into our final thoughts. But how do we like how it wrapped up with everything happening?
I will say that's a very, very fair way to view it, about the idea that it's like too much has happened between them to be as reconciliatory as maybe you would want it to feel. I will say for me, I like even just the start, because when this scene first starts, the creature is standing still, sort of walking. Victor has been laid out for a hot minute now. He's been stabbed, broken, blown up. I will say, by the way, when the creature had the dynamite, I said this to Brendan last night, when he's got the dynamite and he lights it and he pulls his mask down and he's like, run. I really thought he was going to pull the mask down and like bite the dynamite, hold it right in his mouth and just be like, let's go. I also just thought about it as well with the dynamite. So when he gets shot earlier. He gets shot right above his left eye, and the blood comes down into the left eye. When he gets blown up, it blows up his left eye. But when he's being created, and we really focus on an eyeball being put in, it's to his right eye. And I was like, I just think it's interesting that every time one of his eyes gets damaged or destroyed, it's his left, but when he's created, it's his right. I don't know if there's something to that. I just kind of noticed it.
Yeah, nope, that's true.
Yeah, I also will say when he gets shot and he lays in the snow and he's like, I don't know how long I died, but then merciless life found me again. You're like, damn, that's a good line. With that written, that one. But when they start to turn a little like they're starting to reconcile, I mentioned earlier that Victor says, "Don't ever touch me." He is the one who reaches out and takes the creature's hand. He's the one who like starts the reconciliation.
Yeah.
And it's he calls him his son, which is the first time up to this point he's like, I created you. He doesn't necessarily say like you are my son or anything familial at all. It's really just like I created you and you are my burden. And then the way their conversation goes, it just hits me just right. It's really good. It's really solid. I think these are two incredible actors. I gotta say, Oscar Isaac honestly was, when I first heard this was announced, I was like Guillermo del Toro, and I was like sold. It's like Oscar Isaac, and I was like double sold. There for this, love Oscar Isaacs, but I for me it really works because even though a lot has happened between them, and they are very far apart. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a bit of a sucker for people making peace. There's something about that in storytelling that I find a lot of joy in. And it does unfortunately usually happen right before one of them is about to die. You gotta wait the last minute. But for me, I really like the last scene. I will say that what you were saying, Lee, about there being a lot of symbolism behind him pushing the ship back out, I didn't really think about that, but that's a really good point. I honestly just thought it was like he was just sort of being nice to them. He knows they're stuck. This is the strongest thing ever, so he just like, I'll push the ship out. It's nothing for me. And I do kind of like the idea also that the ship captain, I think, is a very interesting character, despite ultimately not doing a whole lot in this movie. I really like his character. I like that he is just like, I'm going to sit and listen to this story. This monster or this creature has his hand up. And he is about to remove this dude's head, and he's still like, fuck you. I'm like, man, this dude's got balls of steel. But I like the kind of knowing look that he gives the creature at the end as the creature walks off, into the sunset on the Arctic. God knows where he's walking to. But I don't know. The end of this just really hits me. It hits me just right. I do really, really enjoy the end of this.
Yeah, I tend to lean more towards, I think it's a very well written scene between Frankenstein and the creature in the end. I think it's well done. I do think maybe we are a little too far gone, as you were saying, to fully buy into like this full reconciliation at the end. I do think it's a lovely moment, like Bradley pointed out, with Victor being the first one to initiate that final contact between the two of them, especially given his and antagonistic sort of approach earlier on to him making any contact whatsoever. The thing that I find most interesting is that very final shot where he's walking out into the expanse of snow and you see the sun rising on him, because it makes me think of something that we see during the montage where he's spending time with the old man, where he talks about how snow brings like new life and washes away our cares and our sins and everything else. So now this is the creature literally stepping into a new life, a new purpose, a new situation. I think there's a nice parallel there. But that's where I kind of am on it.
Well, there's a bit of a religious, motif going on throughout this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
Because because he's got that statue of Saint Michael where he's constantly looking at it, and he even has it in his workshop when he's when he's working, as if it's some sort of like inspiration for him.
Mhm.
But also keep in mind too, I mean, when he's on that ship and he's talking to Lars Mikkelsen and he's telling his story, he's confessing his sins basically. He's
Yeah.
basically saying, this is what I've done, I need some form of absolution, and the absolution comes from the creature when he confronts him. And really, if you think about it, I mean, he's been running away from this creature this entire time because he sees him as a problem, but he doesn't really internalize it to where it's like, well, this creature is a problem because I made him my problem, right? So by offering by offering that peace, by offering his hand out and saying he forgives him, that's him finally getting the absolution that he's always wanted, because ever since childhood he's been carrying this resentment that he's had. First, where he's resentful against his father for being such a hard ass, and then he's resentful of the fact that his father wasn't able to save his mother, and then he's resentful of the fact that he reached out to Elizabeth, but Elizabeth doesn't share the same feelings that he's had for her. So he kind of so the way that he reacts to all these situations, it's him trying to it's him trying to like just let people know, hey, this is how I feel about the situation. It's shitty and I don't like it and I want to change it, but he does it in the worst way possible, right? So when he tells the captain his story, when he confesses his sins, and Brendan, to your point, when the creature finally pushes the ship out of the way and he steps into the sunlight amidst the snow, you could sort of see it as like a baptism, especially when he emerges from the ice, right?
Yeah.
He takes that plunge and he emerges from the ice. It's like he becomes a new creature, right? Because up until that point when he goes up to the ship and he tries to attack the sailors, he's full of he's like Victor, he's full of resentment, he's full of anger against humanity for what they've done to him. But as soon as he comes out of the ice and he confronts Victor and the captain, by him telling his side of the story and him confessing his sins, it comes to realize, I'm letting go of my burden as much as Victor Frankenstein is. So now what's the next step? Now that we've unburdened ourselves, we make peace, right? And when they make that peace, they come to the realization that we've unburdened ourselves. We no longer feel this, animosity towards one another. So what's the next step? Victor, obviously, he goes to his reward or his punishment, wherever you think Victor Frankenstein ends up, and the creature, being blessed or being cursed with eternal life, he now has to figure out, well, where do I go from here? Like, what's my next step? And that kind of made me curious, because as as he's standing there in the ice, I'm wondering, well, where exactly does this creature go at this point? Because Victor Frankenstein, in a sense, kind of gave him that purpose. I mean, it wasn't a very good purpose, but he gave him a purpose. And now that source of purpose is gone, now he's got to find something else to do. Is he going to, hopefully I'm thinking he does good, or does he continue doing what he does, or does he kind of wrestle with the dilemma of why was I created? Because that question never really gets answered for the creature's part. Even when he discovers that journal, it's like it's that one thing that it's that one question that he's asking, that a lot of us have asked at one point in our lives, is what is our purpose in this world? And the creature's asking himself, why was I created? What am I going to do?
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bradley.
I was saying that's fair.
Yeah. Yep. So, all right. Well, I will start the wrap up here, right? So, I would say, talked a lot about this, right? And I'm gonna throw a final grade on this, right, out of 5. I'm gonna give it a 3.8 out of 5. Right. Here's kind of some of my thoughts about it. Number one, as much as I know that we've, kind of thrown some shade on it in certain areas, especially with maybe some of the storytelling devices that happen, this is still quite an enjoyable film. I just, from the visual aspect of it, it's totally amazing. I love how Guillermo del Toro has a way of kind of bringing this world to life in a very unique way. Like, I just love the visual style, from the looks, the sets, everything really looks great throughout this. You know, and I think for the most part, I mean, the story is enjoyable. However, I feel like it tries to maybe play it too safe, and I'm not a big a fan of that, knowing how the source material happened, right? I think the character morality being kind of removed from this really weakens the story from me, because that was always something to me that was very interesting in the original one, is just that there is this ambiguity, right? You have this creature that, you know, it lashes out because it knows anger, and it knows anger because it's a living being, right? We all have that type of thing, right? So, you know, for the monster to lash out at like other people, it is just something that happens, right? That's a characteristic of us. Now, granted, I'm not saying go out there and murder people, but you know, it is something that we experience as human beings. There's gonna be that, and I just felt like it was kind of really weird for me that they took that all away, and they made this very much a, hey, cool, you know, Victor Frankenstein, he's supposed to be the bad guy, right? And the monster is just supposed to be this altruistic, pure creation, that's, you know, really just kind of, it's a product of everything that's going around, right? There's a lot more focus on the loneliness of everything, and not necessarily like, you know, for Victor, right? His ambition just kind of goes wild, right? That always like blows my mind, right? You know, this is the guy that thinks of himself as like a god, right? I mean, he literally talks about how he's challenging death, and he's like, you know, maybe God just inept, right? You know, there's so many, you know, really cool things that are there, and I just feel like it missed the mark. And I think if the character if the characters were a little bit more, I would say, consistent with how they happen, right? I think kind of where Victor fell off for me, especially, is like once his creation happens, it just feels like he throws in the towel so quick, and that was frustrating for me as watching that, because I'm like, come on, dude, you just created life, like, come on, man, like, and it feels like you just gave up on it too quickly, and that's like, this is not what I would imagine someone that has dedicated their life to doing this, that you'd be so willing to give up on something like this. And with the creature, right, it was just too like Disney princessy. Like, I just couldn't get over that as I saw it. It was too whimsical. I'm like, you know what? Yes, like, it's a creature. Like, we're all products of our kind of development. But man, like, that creature's seen a lot of shit. And we're just trying to play off like it's all like good, right? We're trying to like point out like some of the flaws that it had, but it's just minor in comparison. I just feel like there was more they could have done with these characters that would have made the dynamic much better. Like I said, kind of the ending with Elizabeth getting shot by Victor, like, there's just certain things I felt like, okay, I feel like we're not putting enough effort into making the characters more interested and engaging, and that kind of took me away from it. So with that all being said, right, 3.8 out of 5. I still really enjoyed it. I would thoroughly say for people to go out there and watch it if you haven't. It is definitely, if anything, eye candy, but certainly it's backed by a lot of strong performances. I mean, really across the board, right? I could not point out one bad performance I could think of in the whole set, right? I mean, this is just super well done. I just think that maybe there was a direction that we could have gone in that would have made the story more interesting for me. So 3.85, I'll leave it to one of my 3 other panel mates here to wrap us up.
I would probably give it, for me, maybe like somewhere between a 4 and a 4.5 out of 5. I think I definitely would have cut probably 15, 20 minutes of this movie.
Yes.
I think the pacing is good. I just think there's too much we don't need in this. So I would have cut a bit more. Definitely would have cut it out of Victor's chunk of it. For me, the lack of the ambiguity between the good and evil, I was fine with it. I 100% get why people would want more of it or would be missing that in this story. I really like Del Toro. I really like his worlds, the fantasticalness of them. Again, the guy that played, honestly, they're really across the board. And I don't think there was a bad performance in this. I do like the use of color, love the imagery. A lot of great lines. I mean, like I mentioned earlier about like the merciless life found me again. I love when Victor's like, say one word, give me one word, make me save you. I like that. There's a lot of great writing in this. There is some that I'm like, yeah, okay. But I think overall it's an excellent film. Definitely worth a watch. I really enjoyed watching this in theaters. Like it was good at home. This was one that in theaters was excellent. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. I would watch it again. Will watch it again. Yeah, I was a big fan.
Yeah, I would probably give it a straight 4 out of 5. I know throughout the course of this, it sounds like I'm the book was better sort of thing.
A little bit.
Which I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Del Toro had a very clear story he wanted to tell. He had a very clear in with how he saw the story and how he wanted to tell it. And I know he's been back and forth on this thing since he was a kid because he loved the story and related to it so much. I love Del Toro's filmmaking. I love the way things look visually in his worlds that he creates, the sort of fairy tale aspect of it. The performances, as everyone said so far, are fantastic. I think Elordi is even like an outside shot for a Best Supporting Actor Oscar contender in this. So I think he was fantastic. He did I said to Bradley last night when we were watching it, the way that the innocence that his eyes portray when he's first out there in the world, just the facial and eye acting alone, like top-notch work. I do think there are some issues with the script. I do have the issues with Harlander, as we spoke about, as a character and as a plot device. And the dichotomy of the two characters, of Victor and the creature, do stand out to me. I do still think that it's weird to say because of some of the directions that they take, but Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein movie is probably the closest adaptationally to the book that I've seen. But this one was still really good. I will watch it again at some point. It was a fun time. I do wish there was a little bit more nuance to Victor's character in it, though.
I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 on this one. I mean,
Podcast. Sorry, guys.
so
yeah,
so-
I was about to say, dang, I was expecting that one. Okay, Luca. Sorry, go ahead, Luca.
here's my thing. I mean, Guillermo del Toro, his version of Frankenstein is as faithful to the novel as J.J. Abrams' Star Trek was to the original series, right? It's got all the characters that we know. It's got all the plot points, but it doesn't follow the same age-old narrative that we're used to, right? And to Guillermo del Toro's credit, I appreciate the fact that he decided to take this in a new direction, but I felt like some of the plot points that he emphasized in the movie, they really didn't fly for me. I mean, Harlander, I didn't have too much of an issue with him, but at the same time, it's like, well, he didn't play as nearly as a big of a role as I thought he would play, right? Mm-hmm. The biggest one for me is the relationship between Victor and Elizabeth, because I genuinely thought that Elizabeth would fall in love with Victor, and that would kind of create that sort of momentum, from which the story would progress. Because obviously in the book, Victor and Elizabeth fall in love and they get married, and then when he loses Elizabeth, that kind of drives him on this path of revenge, right? Whereas here, it's more of an infatuation, and it's not even reciprocated, because Elizabeth tells him, I've made my choice. I'm going to go with William here. But but I kind of feel like there could have been a lot more done, and I would even say, to your guys' point, it could have been done in a much shorter span, because there are some element, because I mean, let's be frank here, Victor's part took up most of the screen time in this movie. And I felt like maybe if you had excised some of the bits here, some of the details there, maybe it would have been a lot more manageable, because there was a lot being thrown at you to where you kind of had to figure out, well, okay, well, Victor is doing this and he's saying this and this happens and that happens. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to watch it over and over again to kind of get the feel for what's going on here, because you're not going to get it, in one go, right?
Yeah.
And I mentioned this earlier, and I'll say it again. Del Toro is giving us, the children's version of Frankenstein. So it's not as visceral, and it's not as, bloody as the original book. And that's not a bad thing, but I kind of feel like a lot kind of gets lost when you excise or you alter a few things here and there, or you add characters who don't really play that big of a role, like Harlander in the movie.
Yeah.
But but to your point, I mean, Oscar Isaac does a phenomenal job as Victor Frankenstein. You really do get the madness that's within him. Jacob Elordi, my God, like he plays that, he plays him to perfection as the creature. I think the one person who I felt like should have been fleshed out more was Mia Goth's character.
Yeah.
Elizabeth.
100%.
Like, because had we seen more of her, and I would even say, like, had you played her as a tragic character, because to your point, Bradley, you said that William was a tragic character in this movie because he tries so hard to be the good brother to Victor, and Victor just treats him like a pissant, like as if he's nothing. He's just a tool for for what he wants to do. I felt like had we seen more of Elizabeth, had they given Elizabeth more to do, and had they made her a bit more of a tragic figure, I think when she does die near the end of the movie, that would have been far more impactful for Victor to kind of do what he does later on when he pursues him into the ice to try to kill the creature. Because when Victor does it in the movie, it's like, okay, well, he's just crazy. He's just some guy who's hunting a creature, and he recklessly gets lost in the ice, and I guess he drops all the dynamite, and and then he gets picked up by a bunch of Danish guys on a ship, and I feel like and I know you guys have said this, but I will say it again on my end. Had they fleshed out Victor, and had they amped up the ambiguity, kind of made Victor more of a likable person rather than just this crazy obsessed guy who is very much detached from humanity, then it would have been a bit more palatable for me. So that's the reason why I'm giving it 3 out of 5.
That's fair. All of that is really fair.
But I do want to ask you guys a question. So we've done a discussion of Nosferatu and Robert Eggers, and I know you guys have done it on your channel too. I do want to ask you this: how do you think Robert Eggers would have approached the Frankenstein story? Do you think he would have tried to do his own spin on it, or do you think he might have been a bit more faithful to the source material?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I think it would probably be closer to the source material. I think he would have his little flourishes in here or there, because for the most part, Nosferatu was fairly consistent with what the original was.
Yeah, it was a German adaptation of the Bram Stoker original. Yeah.
So Nosferatu as both an adaptation of Dracula and a remake of the actual Nosferatu film both hailed pretty close to the source material.
Mm-hmm.
But he added his own little flourishes and worked and added more depth to Ellen Harker as a character and fleshed out both the Harkers. So that would be an interesting movie to see. I would be very interested in that.
Yeah, I see. I would like to do an episode where we actually discuss how exactly Robert Eggers would go about making that, because I sincerely believe at some point, maybe not next year or even 2027, but at some point before the decade is out, we do see Robert Eggers, have a go at the Frankenstein story himself.
He did try it, right? He actually did try it. He said he gave up after a few weeks of trying to do it. So it's definitely in the back of his mind. I don't know how much interest he has in actually trying to get it done, but he did give up on it, and he was like, well, hopefully Del Toro does it justice. So, so I have to appreciate a guy that might realize, hey, this is maybe a bit more challenging to try to adapt. but he definitely gave it a go.
But hey, I mean, Del Toro. But now that Del Toro's version's out, I mean, who's to say Robert Eggers isn't looking at that and thinking to himself,
Very good point.
Maybe I could do better.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I am interested. He's making his werewolf movie right now,
Yeah,
and then apparently his next movie after that's going to be adapting A Christmas Carol. So I am interested to see how he does that.
Well, you know the design on that Ghost of Christmas Future is going to be horrifying. Oh my god!
So
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you said Eggers for if he did Frankenstein. I'm like, boy, you know that creature design is going to be sick, and you knew it's either going to be Ralph Ineson or Willem Dafoe, so you know it's going to be played well.
I mean, Ralph Ineson's going to be in that movie. I mean, we know that for sure.
One of them will be Victor, one will be the creature. Done. That's the important roles. Yeah, that's interesting.
that's a really interesting thought experiment.
Like I said, it's at some point we need to get back together and we need to do an episode where we actually discuss in detail how exactly Robert Eggers would go about doing it. Now, I'm not saying it's something that he'll definitely do for sure, but based on what we've seen, where do we think he might go at, in terms of the story? Because I think there's a lot that can be done. I really do think Lily Depp Rose would come back as Elizabeth. I think for sure.
Yeah, I could see it. She's in his werewolf movie now. So
Yeah.
Well, when you said the werewolf movie, I started thinking about when you said that he mentioned this one, the idea of Frankenstein being a difficult movie to make. I started really fast in my head going through, like, if you were to do Jekyll and Hyde from a character standpoint, it's actually fairly easy to do.
Yeah.
Jekyll is very different than Hyde. They're pretty straightforward characters. Dracula, not a particularly tragic character. I was starting to think of like a lot of the Universal monster movies, and when I thought about Frankenstein, I was like, yeah, Frankenstein's always been the one that's like, there's such a tragicness to his character and to the creature. And I was like, I get someone being like, I find this very difficult to do. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I'm like, just on paper, I get that one being a lot harder than maybe some of the other big monster franchises or Universal monsters to try to put into a modern era, because you're going to have that question of, to what level do I show each of them as a monster? To what level do I show each of them as a relatable human? And I can see that being really freaking hard to do.
Yeah, I mean that's something that we can definitely take a look at some point. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Frankenstein. Lee,
right.
You want to go ahead and take us out here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, Bradley, Brendan, man, I so appreciate you guys for joining with us. This has been a fantastic conversation. Been a ton of fun to get some other perspectives in here. And obviously great to add things that I know I fall short of that luckily you guys help fill in the blanks for. So I really appreciate that for coming on here. I also want to point out, I don't think a single one of us ever called the creature / the monster Frankenstein. So a huge round of applause to us, right? Constantly an issue that you always hear about, people accidentally doing that. I think we did great of avoiding that plague, and it was fun. And I want to thank the audience as well for listening to four dudes just sit here and ramble about Frankenstein. Hopefully you guys find this enjoying, and looking forward to the next things that we have coming up in the new year. So thanks everyone for watching. Be sure to check out their channel as well. Luca, my man, make sure you put their channel in here somewhere so we can go ahead and share that love. But
yeah, I will. I will put the link in the description. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Luca. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.